I think the reason that Bravely Second seems to have a better story, to me at least, is because there's an underlying theme throughout the game. Sure, both Default and Second basically share the exact same generic anime weeaboo story, but it's not like it's the worst story there's ever been. Default felt like it was just a story and that was it, just telling a story, which is fine. But Second went a little further and connected its characters with the theme of sin. Second also went a little more in depth about one of the major events in the Bravely Universal timeline, the Great Plague. Unlike Default, which offered these pieces of info very slowly through the optional side fights which you could do 5 times over, the Great Plague is a part of the side story for Second as well, but there was enough of it incorporated into the actual mandatory storyline that it made you want to actually go hunt for the rest. So today, we're going to talk about 2 things. The theme of sin that underlies nearly everyone in the game, and the event that seems to connect these people together, the Great Plague. I really don't think I should need to say this, considering the title literally says Story Analysis, but spoilers ahead anyways. Now, after doing the research for this, I realized it's going to be one heck of a video. It took me 45 minutes to find all of this info. So first, I will go over the history of the plague, and then talk about sin as we go along, and then add some more comments about sin afterwards. Let us begin. The whole story begins with our beloved Yoko, the Sin Demon, or Yokai. She has existed on Luxendarc for 4.6 billion years, which is quite long. She had friends at this time on Luxendarc and lived amongst the rest of the world. Then, one day, 2 travelers came to Luxendarc on a glimmering ship, as she put it. Sounds like a metal spacecraft to me. So these 2 people who arrived, these travelers, appeared to be coming from the celestial realm. The song that plays during this scene further emphasizes this fact. It's Altair and Vega's theme. Anyways, Yoko took a liking to these 2 travelers and showed them around Luxendarc, helping them in the world. However, one day while working in the laboratory on their ship, something awful and unexpected happened. A rare disease from the celestial realm that was on their ship, a new possibility as to why its residents like Altair were fleeing, mixed with an illness from Luxendarc, resulting in the quickly multiplying creation of the Origin Plague. Left unchecked, this plague would destroy all life on Luxendarc, everyone that Yoko loved and cared about. Since she was a yokai and was therefore apparently not affected by the disease, Yoko took the seeds of the Origin Plague within herself and asked the 2 travelers to seal her away. They did as she asked, and so she slept for 1,000 eons. A civilization at one point believed that a god slept in the cave Yoko was sealed in, so they built a shrine like any religious group, and placed it at the front of the cave, all the while with her still sleeping. I am not 100% sure of this, but I believe at some point in the game it mentioned that this shrine was of Kuhulin. Then this society rose, fell, and disappeared. I have a hinting suspicion that this could also be the mysterious island of Wa, a civilization that built some of the stronger weapons available to be found in the Bravely series. This society and civilization fell and disappeared long ago, and I believe it might be unlikely that this is a chance as well, because I'm pretty sure that the island supposedly sunk into the ocean. Jump forward to 24 centuries before the events of Bravely Second. Founder Geniolja landed on the shores of Yoko's land and woke her. In his time, he had not the medicine to heal her, so he promised that one day someone from his bloodline would return and do so. Yoko grew a sense of hope that she would finally be free from this curse of having to hold the plague. Now we are at the point of action. 2 decades before the events of Bravely Second, Greed Geniolja, Yu's father, the second ambitious man, Founder being the first, landed on the same shores and found Yoko. He believed that he was the one destined to save her, so he moved Yoko's soul into the body of a young girl that was on the voyage with him. Greed also attempted to take a great amount of treasure from the cave back with him to fill the church's coffers, along with the shrine that was previously mentioned. Of course, only he knew the truth, that Yoko had the seeds of the plague within her, and quickly enough, the girl was struck with fever within a few days. The girl's grandfather, referred to as the Compassionate Man, wanted to quarantine the girl while they were in port, but Greed wanted to continue the Gathlashio. His secret plan was to get her back there, where proper medical research and care could likely destroy the plague. Greed asked the Church for permission, or the Crystal Orthodoxy at the time, if they could come home. They responded by sending Geist Grace, the current holder of the Exorcist Asterisk. He had to leave his son behind, something he did not want to do, but had no choice. He arrived to perform an exorcism on the girl, but once he saw her, he knew immediately that it wasn't a demon. Well, I mean, there was a demon in her, but that wasn't what was causing the illness in the girl. Now, Geist had been sent to do an exorcism ritual. One faction of the fleet wanted to use the ritual as a way to buying time for some quarantine, but the other side thought that the ritual would cure her and they could simply go on home. According to Geist, there were 4 men involved in the decision of whether to head home. A compassionate man, the girl's grandfather, a covetous man who wanted to get the treasure back home to the Orthodoxy, a merciful man, and Greed, the ambitious man. As the decision was being made, the merciful and compassionate man wanted to delay the girl's departure with the ritual, while Greed and the covetous man wanted to foil the ritual to get back to Gathlashio immediately. The decision was almost decided when Geist reported the girl's condition to the Office of Public Health, who ordered the girl into quarantine. It is likely that Geist returned back home after this, but only too late. His son had been claimed by the plague, and his soul lingering, waiting for his father. Thus, Geist the Bloody is a victim of sin. Though he commits them as a member of the Gland's empire, it is because of the fault of others that his son died, and therefore he commits his sins now to atone for the ones that have happened to him, and the ones that he caused. He blames himself for being the cause of the plague and not stopping these men from their decision. During this time, the covetous man approached the merciful man, claiming that the church's medicine and practices back in Gathlashio could heal her. The merciful man spoke to the compassionate man, and in the end they changed their minds. The ritual took place, and they left port, breaking their quarantine orders. This obviously only began to plant the seeds of the plague around the world. Only on the 3rd continent in their voyage did they finally hear word from where they had come. The first port they had entered was in the midst of a terrible disease. Greed immediately felt sorrow. He realized his sins of avarice and pride and fault, and decided to atone. He gave every sailor in the fleet a flagon of rum laced with poison. Then he sunk his ships, the treasures, and the young girl with Yoko, all to prevent the plague from continuing. This is why I believe that Geist went home earlier, otherwise he would have died during this section of the time. Yet still, even this act was not just out of atonement. It is very possible that the Orthodoxy gave Greed in order to sink everything just then, only to spare Eternia. In the end, Greed made it back with a little bit of treasure, but enough to fill the church's coffers and put himself in a high position within the church. Not long after, his first son Denny was born. It was around this time that the plague finally reached them. The first deaths in Eternia happened in Brave's home village, now known as Gravemark Village, where Magnolias initially met in the game. Brave petitioned to use the crystal to heal the sick, but instead, the church cut off the high roads and border villages, leaving them all to die. Repulsed by the church's actions, Brave left his priesthood, but not before giving Professor Norzen full authority to investigate the origins of the plague, and building a secret network of people within the church to keep an eye on the goings-ons. A little while after, the plague started to come to an end, but not from a cure. No, in fact, things were about to get a lot worse. It had run out of victims, and now a new strain had emerged, one that threatened to finish the task of annihilation that the first had failed to complete. Norzen and his team got to work on a cure, immediately. Norzen tested all the new treatments on himself to protect his colleagues, and lost one of his senses in the process. Just as the fear of the second pandemic was beginning to seem more and more realistic, one scientist found that felines had immunity to the strain. She moved a set of resilient antibodies into her daughter's body just before the scientist died. Her daughter was Minette, the Catmancer. Another victim of sin, Minette grew up ignored by her mother for her work and scarred from the pain of the tests the other scientists did on her. But in the end, it was all worth it, and the antibodies were used to form a vaccine that fought off the second pandemic before it was ever a real issue. But while all may seem fine, there were other pressing matters happening at the same time. As people began to uprise against the Church's crimes from the first pandemic, the Orthodoxy decided to initiate the grand ritual by overloading the Earth Crystal with power. Brave knew that this would destroy the world and led a siege against the Orthodoxy in Eternia, eventually taking their headquarters and the Temple of Earth, all of which resulted in the slaying of the Earth Vestal. Then there was the disbanding of the Crystal Guard, surprisingly ordered by Greed himself, who led one of the high houses of the three Cavaliers and wanted to protect himself and his family. House Geniolja and House Camlin fought against those who wished to keep the Crystal Guard together, leading a crusade across Eternia. Two other houses fought against them, and under their command was a talented swordsman named Jerome Bellistra. During an attack on a manor, though Jerome was a great fighter and had killed plenty of soldiers before, he was finally overwhelmed and killed. He left his son in the care of a squire by the name of Angard. Hence, Jan Angard, another victim of sin who has joined the Glan's empire. During this attack as well, Nikolai was there and had been ordered to attack a certain wing of the manor. He realized his sins that he and his brethren were committing, and filled with guilt, he continued on, but began recruiting people to rot the Crystal Guard from the inside out, like Jan. In the end, Geniolja and Camlin won, and the Crystal Guard was disbanded. However, this resulted in a rise of bandit activity across Eternia. The houses then formed their own private armies to combat these lawbreakers, which then grew and grew. They marched across Eternia, fighting and burning, eventually reaching the village where Bella and her sister Donna lived. The armies burnt the village to the ground as a testament against the witch who brought the plague unto the world, and Donna was killed. Thus came Dark Vestal Bella, out of the scapegoat that her sister had become for the houses of Geniolja and Camlin. And that concludes the tale of the Great Plague. Now let's take a look at all the sins that connect the main characters of our world. First, we'll brush back over the Glan's Empire again. A good majority of the Glan's Empire are all victims of sin from the Great Plague. Geist, Revenant, Nanette, Jan, Nikolai, Bella, and obviously Denny. Denny felt the most guilt of all, being a descendant of the family that caused all these atrocities and wanted to change the world, to atone. Amy and Angelo seemed to be fairly clean, not really associated with the plague, and Kuhulin was just a result of Bella trying to get her sister back. The Glan's Empire commits sins, yes, but they do it because they believe they are atoning for past sins, or fixing sins that have been cast upon them in the past. The returning asterisk holders from default aren't all particularly bad. There are some obvious ones like Profiteur's strong habit of greed or Ominous's rage, but they weren't created in second, so they don't have the themes as strongly, as that was not the goal with that game. They're good characters nonetheless, though. Now let's have a little peek at an unexpected side. This may be digging a little deeper than is probably relevant, but our heroes aren't shining beacons of humanity either. Tiz and Anyez are the only ones that are scot-free as far as I'm concerned. Yu has his family's sins, but he rejects that in-game and even states this during the fight against Yoko, that he won't be barred by the sins of his predecessors and will live independently of their actions. So he, in his own way, has atoned and moved on from that. Now let's talk about our fine ladies of the group. How about Magnolia acting incredibly lustful and seductive? Or the massive increase in Idia's character trait of loving food? If you're unfamiliar with the 7 deadly sins, as according to Dante, they are as follows: wrath, avarice or greed, lust, sloth, gluttony, pride, and envy. Magnolia's lust, Idia's gluttony. And we can't forget our boy Ringabel, definitely pride. And last but definitely not least, the entire yokai job. It is literally based on these 7 sins, and each of the bosses surrounding them are themed towards a particular sin. The moves you can learn, they're even named after them: gluttony, avarice, wrath. Yeah, it's literally in the game as a useful thing. The majority of the problems that arise during the events of Second come from sin, and most of the sin comes from the Great Plague in one form or another. And it is an event that has greatly shaped Luxendarc, from being the entire reason the Glan's Empire was formed, to how the Duchy of Eternia started as a result of rising against the evil Orthodoxy, who abandoned its people to die. Everything has evolved from sin. But even so, the theme of Bravely Second's story isn't just sin. It's about accepting sins and past faults, and learning from them to build a better future. I can only hope that people will one day learn this for themselves, to accept their mistakes and forgive themselves, and be able to move on with their lives.